Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, depending on where you are. I'm Randy Horton, Chief Solutions Officer at Orthogonal. Thanks to all of you for logging in today for our webinar, Medical Device Manufacturers as Providers, an Emerging MedTech Business Model. As many of you know, Orthogonal organizes webinars about once a month to convene industry experts from medical device manufacturers and sort of adjacent people. And we're really looking to bring together and share best practices and new ideas that are coming out in the industry so that we can all help accelerate. We've got a couple terrific guests, as you'll see. A couple quick things. First of all, we really value your totally candid feedback on webinars. So if one of us reaches out to you afterwards for feedback on how we did, what we could do better, any subjects that are of interest, we'd ask you please take the call. And second, we don't like doing this, but we've been told we should do it just so people aren't wondering who we are and what we do. So very briefly on Orthogonal, and then this is really the last you'll hear about us, as opposed to from our guests. We're a software development consulting firm that works with medical device manufacturers to help them accelerate the development of software as a medical device, connected device systems, and digital therapeutics. Really, we got into this business because we saw a huge opportunity to improve patient outcomes faster. And the way we do that is by taking the best of modern software engineering and product management tools and techniques, not from MedTech, not from healthcare, but really the techniques in tech that have overturned the whole world, and found ways to fuse them with MedTech's focus on safety and effectiveness in a way that goes far beyond saying, we're lean and agile and user-centered and we do DevOps and all that cool stuff, but don't worry, we're still compliant. We actually believe that the ways of building modern software products are incredibly well suited to MedTech's focus on quality and demonstrated quality, and that we can actually fundamentally raise the bar on safety and effectiveness. So not just build cooler devices with faster releases that are more complicated than ever before, but we think we can actually stand behind them with even more certainty than we ever had before. So if you have any questions about that, you're welcome to call us. Okay, so let's start by introducing our panelists today and having them just say a bit about themselves. Why don't we just start with name and title, and then we'll come back for more detail. I'm going to go in order of my screen layout here. Someday I'll figure out if there's an algorithm that defines how that works from Zoom. But Nick.
Good day, everyone. My name is Nick Agahari. I am the CEO and founder of Australis Scientific. And I'll pass it back on to Randy. Do you want me to describe the company now, or?
Let's come back to that real quickly. Adrian?
Hi, my name's Adrian Lam. Thank you very much for having me on, team. I'm the CEO and president of a AI cardiovascular company called CorVista Health. Thank you for having me today.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us. And Bernhard.
Bernhard Kappe, founder and CEO of Orthogonal. Since you already gave the spiel, I won't give the spiel, but I've been interested in this subject for quite a while. We have a number of clients who have combined services with product and come up with alternate business models. And in some cases, those have really been the thing that have unlocked value and gotten them from, 2 million in revenue to 500 million in revenue, and from a struggling startup to $3 or $4 billion public company. So I think there's a lot of value here for companies in thinking about these things in other ways. So I'm really excited to have this webinar with you guys.
Great, thanks. So a little bit of logistics. We're going to, in the first 50 minutes or so of this webinar, we're going to try and cover the core topic. But to the extent that all of you have more questions, we will stick around for a while. And we actually usually get about 40% of the people who stay over that time with additional questions. And also, you're, of course, welcome to reach out to any of us. Probably via LinkedIn is the easiest way afterwards. So this is a really exciting topic for us. As Bernhard said, digital enables all kind of business models. I mean, that's just sort of a trite saying at this point, but it's true. But in MedTech, this many years into sort of the digital world and the internet world, we're still largely selling razors and blades, or razors and service contracts, or just razors. There hasn't been a lot beyond that, but there's really real potential. And I think, as we look at larger trends in healthcare, one of the really interesting things we saw was companies like CorVista and Australis really finding unique ways to bring devices to market, seeing that for the device to be successful, it wasn't even like you set out to be providers, but you realize for the device to be successful, you had to step into some kind of role like that. Not like a telemedicine firm pumping and dumping, pardon my expression, Ozempic or Wegovy instead of going to your local doctor, but really in partnership with the doctor who's the ordering physician. And we think that's a really exciting thing. There's a lot of interesting ins and outs and whatnots, to use my big Lebowski expression, that we'll get to. But first, I do have to play, I'm going to play just a little bit. We now have a tradition on our webinars, just so we can all feel like we're not going to be replaced tomorrow by AI. We have a website we use to generate, here, I got to get this right, to generate a song, a unique jingle for each webinar, and they're really bad. They're really bad. So we wanted to show this. We'll share the first 30 seconds, and at the end we'll play the rest of it. But they're so bad they're kind of fun to listen to. So
That's a good way of getting people to leave the room, right? So yeah.
Sometimes you just can't take your eyes off it. So
Hey, like MedTech minds, MedTech minds, sharp as a scalpel edge. MedTech minds, sharp as a scalpel edge. Nick, Adrian, Bernhard, Randy, cutting the wedge. Diagnostics to therapeutics, the whole healthcare arc. Value-based care ignites the spark. From devices to providers, a paradigm flips. Revolutions brewing in these business scripts. Medical minds pushing.
all right, we'll stop
right.
with that for now, as to not scare off anybody. But our count has not gone down yet.
This
so
is now med device brain rot, as it were, right?
yes, or AI slop for medical devices. And actually, but it is interesting to watch because each time I do this, the company's introduced more and more features to give me control about individual things. Now, this time they actually let me go in and customize the lyrics they generated and then added it in. So I put in the lyric at the end about how bad the song is that, you know, you can listen to at the end. Okay, so
Love it.
all of that happening, let's start with our panelists and have them explain a little bit. Tell us about your company, your core medical device, what it does, why it's an innovation in the space, why it's gonna, you know, why it is making patients' lives better, and then a little bit of from that into what does that mean that you're actually also stepping into a provider space at a tactical level. So let's start with Nick.
Sure. Thank you again, everyone, for the opportunity. I guess my name is Nick Agahari. The company is Australis Scientific. Our product name is Confident Smart Patch. Confident Smart Patch is going to be our first product into the market. It is a smart patch technology that delivers something called percutaneous tibial nerve stimulation onto the ankle for the indication of idiopathic overactive bladder or urge urinary incontinence. Now, percutaneous tibial nerve stimulation is something that has been around for about 20 plus years. It's something that the urological community has been using in their offices, in the clinics, and in the hospital to treat patients with urinary incontinence. The biggest issue there is it requires the clinician's time to position an acupuncture needle correctly onto the ankle to stimulate the tibial nerve in order to normalize the communication from the ankle up to the sacral plexus and between the sacral plexus and the micturition center in the brain. What we have done is taken away from the in-person aspect of that technology, requiring a clinician to position a needle accurately. What we've done in our smart patch technology is developed anatomical landmarking tools that are novel and patented, and combined them with advances in mobile application as well as miniaturization to develop a patch that can be self-applied by the patient with sensors that allow the clinicians to have remote oversight completely, even though the patient is applying the technology independently. So we do that through an asynchronous model, or it could be synchronous via virtual first telehealth. We allow the clinicians to monitor the patients to ensure that the device has been positioned correctly. We have impedance monitoring to ensure that the right nerve has been stimulated. And we capture all of this in our sensors to develop a reimbursable report that the physician can submit to the insurers. Where we're taking that a step further is really developing the service model around it to ensure that clinicians can now treat more patients in their clinics without having to see the patients up front in person. So effectively for clinicians, what we provide is a technology that allows them to treat patients better in their own homes rather in their clinic. And we turn that around from a 45 minutes weekly session with a patient into a 10-minute screening virtually and screening of the actual reimbursement report and all the data and the sensing that we've collected, as well as the patient-reported outcome of symptoms. For patients, we do similarly. What we also provide for patients is a go-to technical service, which is manned by continence nurses and technicians. And what we're able to do is ensure that the patients get support whenever they need it, especially as they're delivering the therapy, without having to go directly to their clinician and their providers.
Excellent. All right, Adrian.
Yeah. Thank you, Nick. Oh, sorry, I was busy listening and I completely forgot that I had to prepare for my question. So taking a step back, CorVista, for those of you who don't know what we do, essentially our approach and a high-level approach is that we think of healthcare systems and healthcare systems as hubs and spokes, generally speaking, right? Where the patients generally are referred in from the spokes and the peripheries, and they go into the hubs where there's all the specialist care, all the advanced equipment, tertiary hospitals. That would be the hubs, right? And the problem is a lot of the people don't need to be going into the hubs. A lot of them can probably be kept local. Right now, they're going into the hubs. It's taking some time, healthcare cost. It's taking some time, later diagnosis, and it's also costlier because it's in the hubs, right? You got to share. It's like you got to share the capex of going into the hospital, and so that model that's sort of the current framework. So what we do is we try to go to the tips of the spoke, right? Now, at the tip of the spoke, you generally have, what we do is we test for cardiovascular disease. So a very typical patient use case would be, hey doc, I have chest pain, I have shortness of breath, I have dyspnea on exertion. So cardiovascular disease, and it could mean a plethora of different things. And the GP or the PCP, they don't know what you might have, and they don't necessarily have the tools to do what you might to analyze what you have. And so right now, everyone's referred downstream into the hospitals or radiology or a specialist. Now, when we go and we place a device or whatever technology and solution into the peripheries, right, into the outpatient centers, these are places that can't afford a $500,000 piece of kit or a large piece of machinery. They just cannot, right? That's number one. Number two, the nature of, I think, MedTech products has changed. So when I entered the industry, you would design one thing, a simple product to help the physician unclog a tube, a balloon, angioplasty balloon, stick two bone together, bone cement, or knee arthroplasty, right? The decision maker is usually the physician, and then they use the device or the product, and then they can usually see the output and the result of that immediately. But the nature of products have changed, right? Nowadays, you have to, the UX, there are many people who touch your product. So for us, the person doing the test, performing the test, and the physician interpreting the test, a lot of the time are actually different people. And sometimes in a different room, sometimes in a different, sometimes at a different time too, And so because of that, like your product is no longer just, a piece of plastic or a tube or a piece of equipment. It's a service, really. And that's why I think right now, we couldn't possibly just be a medical device manufacturer. We actually need to be a provider because number one, because of multiple archetypes of stakeholders use our product. Number two, it's used in a place where there's not a lot of capital equipment and there's no big budgets. And so in a way, there's this trend from CapEx to OpEx, right? We know that now overall in tech and MedTech. And then lastly, we help our customer do a lot of the administration. So in particular, possibly sell a, yeah, you just can't do it, right? And so we take that service on behalf of our, or what we perform that service on behalf of our customers. And so we have to be a service. So it's just the nature of business has changed. And I would say that it's enabled by obviously cloud infrastructure, right? Internet speeds, computational speeds. We couldn't do this 10 years ago. We probably wanted to, but we couldn't. And so that's why I think a lot of medtech companies are now expanding their scope, not just making widgets, but providing a more full service solution. And that's the way to do it.
Can I ask you each, how did you arrive at this realization that we're going to be more than just a device company? We're going to be a service delivery company. Was there sort of a tipping point or indications in your research for you that led you there?
Nikki, you want to go first?
Sure. I think I harken back to my time in MedTech, and I've always seen that medical device manufacturers have always had a role in the servicing aspect. In the physical world, you know, we used to hire a large sales team that sit in the OR that assist the clinicians with navigation, with advice on the technicalities of things. And that was the service model. It's not uncommon for a pacemaking product to have a technician that would help the patients with their programming and whatnot. That's definitely the case in neuromodulation. I think hearkening from those days, I've learned that that was large part of the value proposition of why we can trust large medtech. And bringing it into the current day situation, what I saw was if we can enable this in terms of a virtual first servicing model that allows for the same sort of quality, that the same type of discussions between patients, physician, and medtech as a service provider, that allows us to really enable the patients to get care more easily and for the clinicians to dispense care more readily. And that's the way I've been thinking about it from early on in my career. We're just at a tipping point, as Adrian said, where the confluence of cloud servicing, miniaturization, digital health has come and enabled all that to happen now. Adrian, I'll pass it to your thoughts.
Yeah, so thanks, Nikki. So I have to say that I wasn't the brainchild for this business model. I've been quite blessed to be taking over something which is quite interesting. But I am aware of the original kind of thought process of how we kind of came up with this business model. And number one, it comes from unmet needs and breaking down those unmet needs. So we were like, where are those patients? How can you catch the patients earlier in their symptomatic journey before sending them downstream into those hubs, right, that I talked about? And so we were like, okay, that's outpatient, out in the peripheries and out in the extremities, right, rural, remote, and underserved areas. And then we thought, can you just sell a lot of widgets to these guys? Maybe not, And then number two is we're thinking about delivering a digital health service. And so we would naturally want to also bill digitally. And that is one of the biggest things. So this is the second point, right? How do you bill? When you're selling a piece of kit, when you're selling a widget, when you're selling an SKU, you can transact that good, in a physical invoice is a physical good transfer. Nowadays, you do a lot of, bill per clicks, right? You look at, in my space, HeartFlow, just listed a couple of days ago, 2 weeks ago. They are one of the bill per click models. So everything is on the cloud, everything is digital. And so can you expect your sites to be so digitally native and digitally savvy? Maybe not, right? And so in a way, we're like removing a hurdle for our sites and our customers, but also, for instance, right now we are helping our sites bill, right? And so we are applying AIs and even agentic AI to help the billing process and automate it. Obviously, our sites in the outpatient clinics in, say, rural Tennessee are not really set up to do that, right? So not only can we remove a problem, we can also confer an advantage. And so being a provider really is just really the way to do it for many reasons right now for us.
Yeah, let me comment on that. I think you raise a really good point in that if you just look at both hospitals and physician groups and they, they're struggling with, the core services that they are doing. They don't have enough time. They aren't in a position to really invest in technology or digital ecosystems kind of beyond the basics, right? And so there are a lot of services and things that are needed in order to get certain therapies or diagnostics in the market that those are barriers to that. And if you can find the sweet spot of removing those barriers, they get paid for something, you get paid for something, then that's a win-win, right? And so that can be really powerful. If you look at, someone like iRhythm, right? They're providing reports ultimately, and they've turned that into, I didn't check their market cap earlier today, but it was north of $3 billion from a startup. Or you look at a company like, Transmedics, who we work with, who has a device for transporting organs, right? And their initial thought was, we are going to be selling these medical devices to transplant centers, to whoever. And that's where they started out, and they lingered at, like, last year we had 2 million in revenue. Now we have 2.5 million. Oh, we went down, and that was great technology, but not necessarily a viable business model. As soon as they listened to their their market, which was saying, hey, can't you just take over the middleman of sort of, you know, transporting these organs, et cetera? There wasn't really a good way of doing that. And so once they did that, and we're basically, harvesting organs, providing perfusionists, uh, and basically transporting the organs from one place to another, their revenues started increasing. They were able to go public. 2 years ago, they ended up growing to the point where they had to buy an airline, right? And again, they're also multi-billion-dollar public company as a result of finding that niche, and where it was meeting those unmet needs, and really thinking about it not as razors, razor blades, but a service that was being provided that that's quite lucrative and helps save lots of lives, and improves quality of life for liver liver transplant folks, et cetera, et cetera. So good stuff.
Yeah.
And when you can find that in the market, that market can
It's
be
like,
a little bit different in different countries, but we'll talk about that a little bit later.
yeah, that's a really good point, Bernhard. I think I didn't really think about it that way. I used to be in orthopedics at Stryker. And I think what you said makes a lot of sense in the right, for those conventional products where maybe the workflow is all established and then you're just innovating on the product, right? And then so you replace one product, you slip another in there, but the infrastructure, the workflow, that's all already set, the standard of care guidelines and then the payments, everything. But now, as I mentioned, the nature of the product has changed, right? It's wider in terms of scope. And so you got to build the other stuff around whatever your core product sensor is. And perhaps that's where that kind of dovetails those two concepts. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, then it's the digital ecosystem that you are building around that, some of which is device and some of it is billing and all kinds of other
That's
things
right.
that you can do to that looks a little bit different if you are, not purely a hardware product company. Your business and what you have to be good at also changes in that regard.
Yeah, it's
What's
good
been
that iRhythm kind of blazed the trail a little bit. They are structured as this thing called an IDTF, Independent Diagnostic Testing Facility, which is to me kind of like a cloud-based pathology lab. So are we. We are actually structured as an IDTF as well. And actually, we know the iRhythm guys pretty well. And so we're taking a lot of learnings from their team. And their market access team is now actually, some of them are working with us, so, which is pretty cool.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
When somebody says, what business are you in? What would you say? Is it?
I say we are in cardiovascular technologies. I usually, it depends on the audience. I answer that question in a different way. If it's a more sophisticated medical audience, I'll tell them a little bit more precisely what it is. But to a more layman audience, I tend to kind of keep it more old school. And then I just explain that we charge in a certain way. But I think it depends on the audience, I think.
Nick, how about you?
Yes, again, it depends on the audience. For some people, we are at the intersection of MedTech. We definitely have a hardware component to our technology. We have software in medical device that could be construed as digital therapeutic. So it depends on the audience, but what we're building is the hardware component, the software component, and the service component all together to serve both patients and clinicians at the same time. It's all really about market access, right? Like as Bernhard has explained, the change in your service model can really unlock that revenue, but not only just revenue, it's really unlocking the ability to serve more and more patients without increasing the burden to clinicians. And I think that's the key thing here. In specialty land, there is a chronic shortage of specialists that are able to treat patients. That's especially true in urology, where for every urologist that's retiring, there is just simply not enough trainees to take their position. So we will continue to have chronic shortages in specialty care. And we need service models like this to augment that care if we're going to continue to serve an aging population, not just in the US, but throughout the world as well.
So let's talk about when you're explaining this to providers, is the reaction like, I don't get it, or I wouldn't trust you with it, or thank God, please take this off my plate?
Depends on the stakeholders within the provider system. Adrian, I'll let you talk about your experience in the cardiovascular first.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. So we get a mixture of responses typically. Now, we're not going really into the hospital tertiary care setting. So we're going into almost like a white space or a green field or a blue ocean, whichever color you prefer. And so generally speaking, I think number one, the concerns we get are more about how the technology works rather than say how the business model works, you know. So we have to explain that a little bit. And then what we have to explain is the how billing might work. Now, in our case, as I explained just previously, billing is kind of a nightmare for these small centers, especially for new things, because they've got to set up a new pathway, they've got to register as a new thing and bill their payers in an original manner. So it's a bit of a nightmare. And so most of our sites actually super appreciate that we take on that kind of burden for them, you know. Eventually though, once we're a novel device, so we still ultimately need to secure category 1 CPT coverage, or rather just a regular reimbursement, whatever form that might take. When that happens, there's an element of potentially putting the billing back on the sites, because there's we've already smoothened the hurdle, right, so to speak, and already established that flow. And so we might just then put that back at the sites. But for now, it seems like it's best done by us, as the innovators, as the ones who are connected, as the ones who can digitize and automate things. It makes a lot of sense.
Excellent.
On our side, I'll extend that discussion. It really does matter the reimbursement strategy that the company has. For us, it is also about explaining the technology and how we're able to look at our predicate technology for percutaneous tibial nerve stimulation and outright show how it is much more safer and how much more efficient it can be done at the at-home setting, facilitated through our sensors and our mobile application. Our aim is really to turn something that used to be 45 minutes face-to-face down to something that's currently about 10 minutes with asynchronous virtual care, down to something that's less than 1 minute when we start setting up our service model. So it's really about convincing the providers that, look, we're not looking to take away any of the clinical decision-making away from the providers and their clinicians. What we're really looking to do is to standardize the clinical care and providing the technical services to enable that to happen, but also the clinical support to allow that to happen without increasing burden to the providers themselves. We have modeling around a CPT code that is a CPT-1 code. So it's been in existence for over 15 years. What we do need to change is where reimbursement hasn't caught up is the site of service, where currently there is reimbursement for site of service in the office, in ambulatory surgical centers, in hospitals. What we're looking to lobby for is an at-home site of service to enable this reimbursement model, not to change, but to input an additional site of service to enable our technology to really serve the masses and change that health economic model.
Actually, Nick just inspired me with a thought. I think that site of service comment is an extremely pertinent one, right? Even for technologies that have codes, some of that innovation is bringing the tech closer to the patient, bringing the sensors closer to the patient, right? And so your site of service changes, and therefore your eligibility for billing certain codes also becomes affected. So that is something that I know we don't really have a problem with that in some ways, because in a way we don't have a code. We don't have that code yet to kind of piggyback off of. And so, but yeah, the site of service is a big one. And actually, there was a comment I think from either Randy or Bernhard, but you know, the nature. It's going back to that same point about the nature of the products, right? So I come from orthopedics and originally, and a little bit of cardiovascular. And I would argue that the early products in both of these spaces are very, very mechanical interventions, right? You're expanding a tube, you are fixing a valve or a wall, or you're piecing two broken bones together, right? Nowadays, our product, and Nick's product too, I imagine, part of that product involves the analysis, the cloud, the AI or machine learning based cloud analysis. And that is very core to the product. Now, the way that reimbursement and billing and payment is really currently structured, it's very much kind of based on like sort of time used, right? It's like, they call it relative value units. And it kind of is a bit of an old school kind of way to say, okay, I need 10 minutes of the physician's time, so that much equals X amount. And then I need 15 minutes of the nurse's time, and then that is structured at Y rate. But nowadays, you have instantaneous computation and algorithm analysis. How do you value that? Just because it's instantaneous, using the old way, it suddenly becomes, oh, is it not valuable at all? So these are some of the discussions. Actually, this is very hot off the press. So very recently, the AMA just issued more guidance, and the CP, sorry, I think it's the AMA, and there was some guidance about how you look at and categorize these sort of AI-based technologies. There's assistive, there's augmentative, and there's autonomous, right? And all of them are a little bit different. And now there's different discussions about how do you value that work. But because of that, because it's instantaneous, how do you value it? So this is a very interesting question, and it's yet to play out.
Yeah, and I would say on that, Nick, in your case, right, you've got the whole site of service is an issue in the United States, but not so much in other countries, right? In Japan, Australia, other places where you're going to market, it's show us the data. It's not necessarily,
Exactly.
oh, this site of service is so different. That is a sort of a legacy and an artifact from, how things, just the legislative process over the last 40 years and the structure of reimbursement and of CMS and through CMS cascading out into other things. The one thing I can say from uh the sort of the conversations that are happening right now with which HHS, CMS, FDA on a lot of these things. Some of our clients are lobbying and working together with those folks. There's, say what you will about the current administration, and I have lots of opinions that aren't great, but in this particular case, they're thinking about it differently. They're thinking much more about what can we do outside of the hospital, what can we do earlier, what can we do in terms of earlier diagnosis, prevention, etc., and also asking the question not just what can we do, but how can we reimburse this? Not can we reimburse this, but how do we actually go about doing that? So I think there's real momentum around that and passion around that, and the willingness to uh, move things faster than they were in under Trump one or Biden or anything before that. So I think I expect some movement on those things based on the things I'm seeing. And honestly, once the cat's out of the bag, it's hard to go back on that kind of stuff, right? So
Agreed.
I think those are some there is this has been very log jammed in the United States for a very long time, and the movement has been glacially incremental up until very recently. But I'm seeing changes there that leave me optimistic.
And
Yeah.
I'll add a little bit to that. I think the provider mix that the companies are going after has a large role to play in that as well. I want to talk quickly about the consolidation of a lot of large private practices. Urology in particular is being consolidated by large private equity firms. And these firms are much more open to discussing value-based healthcare and to do reimbursement outside of the normal framework. So that might be an interesting place to potentially start off with, where you can actually discuss your technology, see where it fits within their ecosystem, how it can better serve their needs in terms of managing their clinical staff, managing the flow through of patients, and what a reimbursed price point would look like, or a contract value-based price point may look like as well. So I think with those type of consolidation, there's a lot of different discussions to be had with different types of providers.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. There's a lot, there's no shortage of change in the industry or writ large, and certainly also, the trends that you mentioned before about subspecialization, folks, retiring, leaving, and just not enough physicians, and more uh, a unhealthier population and an aging population. All of those things are just, there's pressure on the system, and where there's pressure on the system, there's opportunities around that certainly you know private equities taking advantage of, et cetera. There are opportunities there. I'd like to ask a question on kind of how you guys think about, you know, beyond kind of the market access side, the digital ecosystem that you need to support that, right? It's somewhat different than what traditional medical devices companies have needed, but how are you thinking about that, about kind of the data, value of data, all of that part, side of it, how you're going to, take advantage of these opportunities?
Sure. Should I go first?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So, I mean, that is a question, that is the right question to ask, right? Which is, and if you, as someone mentioned, iRhythm earlier, iRhythm, much like us, we were just a sort of a yes or no test, right? I mean, I don't want to trivialize things, but generally we are a a cardiac diagnostic that says yay or nay, you have a disease, and that's useful, but it's only so useful. Where it becomes really useful is when you have a bolus of patients, and iRhythm right now have something like 10 million ECG strips now. I think 10 million patch ECG strips in their history. Now they can mine that using deep learning approaches for insights, discrepancies, pattern recognition, deviations from baseline and norm. And then they've set up a drug discovery or a biomarker licensing business. And that's when you really get interesting. Tempest AI, same thing, right? Starting to do sequencing tests in the beginning, right? Now they've done so many sequences that, again, you can mine that very large database now for biomarkers and insights for drug discovery. So absolutely, that's something that we are looking at as well. In particular, CorVista measures, we are a multimodal system, which means that we derive our diagnosis and our result from multiple signals simultaneously. And for us in cardiovascular, we think it makes sense because we measure right now electrical signals and also hemodynamics, so the behavior of the volume of blood flow. To me, that makes perfect sense to diagnose cardiovascular disease because actually it's a heart and a lung. It's one system, really. It's a cardiopulmonary system delivering packages of oxygen to everywhere in the body. So looking at only one thing, it's kind of like trying to fix your air conditioning just by looking at the generator. You also want to look at the tubes. And that's what we do. And we actually derive a whole bunch of features from the interaction and the intersection of those signals. As it turns out that the gushing of blood, the acceleration of blood through the vessels, and then where it correlates to in terms of the electrical activity of the heart, actually can tell us something about arterial stiffness or the elasticity of your blood vessels, which is of course one of the big features in cardiovascular disease. So there's a lot of there's a lot of data that honestly we don't know what we don't know now. And that's what's interesting, right? Maybe we capture 10 million scans and then we realize that we can't actually tell anything, but we are applying almost a new phenotypic lens, and we are really excited to see what that might yield. We're already, even despite just launching this over a year ago, still small numbers in the bigger scheme of things, growing very well, but we're already finding some insights, things that we would not have seen before with existing technologies. And so once you have data, once it's cloud accessible, once it's HIPAA compliant, there's a lot you can do there. And it really excites me, actually.
It'd be interesting to do an analysis of over time of the number of papers being published, looking at data from medical devices where somebody from the medical device manufacturer is, a lead author kind of a thing. See how that's changing.
Right.
That
Right.
would be
Right.
that would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'll expand it from the therapy side of things. Our technology delivers a therapy, and with that therapy, what we anticipate is a decrease in the patient's urinary symptoms. So when we first started off looking at the core hardware of the technology, we wanted this to be much more safer. So we incorporated things like an inertial motion unit that now has become our sensing unit to ensure not only that the patient has delivery of their therapeutic stimulation safely, effectively, but now that's also started to build into research. What we realized with our form factor was that we've changed something that previously had to be implanted or had to be positioned with a needle sticking in the patient every week in the clinic to something that is a form factor that can stay on the patient 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, like a continuous glucose monitor. And we realized at that point, we can start collecting patients' digital biomarkers. And the research that I did during the fellowship at the Harvard Health Tech Fellowship was looking at how could we utilize the digital biomarkers that we were collecting to personalize our therapeutic stimulation to the patient. Now, with current therapies for neuromodulation, we chronically stimulate the patients on a timely basis. That's because of convenience and because the patients have to show up once a week in the clinic. But now what we started looking at was using the patient's digital biomarkers. For example, sleep at night, we can start collecting sleep biomarkers. And if the patients have nocturia symptoms, which is waking up multiple times at night to urinate, could we preemptively stimulate the patients before a waking event? And that is the research is leaning towards, yes, we can effectively look at stimulating patients preemptively using their digital biomarkers to mitigate them actually waking up to urinate multiple times at night. We have urodynamics data to show that 5 minutes of stimulation on the tibial nerve was able to actually increase the volume of urine the bladder has been able to store before an urgency event, and therefore we hypothesize a waking event. So something that started off as a safety feature, I think is starting to become a data lake of digital biomarkers to personalize the patient's care. And then from that, we can hypothesize multiple morbidity events such as falls. Could we prevent falls due to nighttime activity of urination? And if that, what other health economic models could we build out of that as well? So that's starting to become really interesting in this realm of collecting digital biomarkers from the patient.
And I think that's really, if you're in the service business, you're already starting to think about other things because you are more directly involved in the patient care and capturing this kind of information. You can do that if you're just in a device thing, but it's way harder and more expensive. But if somehow part of what you're doing is building out a digital ecosystem around what you're doing, that is when you can really, start capturing a lot of this information. I wouldn't say for free. It costs money to build out the digital and maintain a digital ecosystem, but it's a lot easier to do that than to have to manually go and beg for that and do that. You can, once you have that ecosystem in place, you can really, capture data, feed data back into it, capture more data, especially if there are, if there's any active data collection from clinicians or patients. What we have found, if you give them the right data that is helpful for them, they're more willing to give you data or access to data that you can then feed back and create a virtuous circle of more data, more insights, more feedback, more improvements for the patient, but also the clinician and for your operations, right?
Yeah.
And so the thing there that I would like have everyone really think about is at the beginning when you're designing your product or your system, don't treat the data as exhaust, right? You don't know, as Adrian was saying, it could be that, that all this data we're collecting, we're not able to get anything out of it. Not likely, but it's possible. You just don't know ahead of time, right? It's like they say in advertising, half of your advertising dollars are wasted. You just don't know which half ahead of time, right? So it's the same thing. You have to really, during the initial design phase, or any time you're adding features, or any time you are looking at this, you have to think about data as part of your strategy. And I'm always more maximalist. Collect everything that is free to collect, right? That you have permissions for, etc. Design your permissions appropriately, and good things will come out of that over time if you do that.
Yeah. I might just supplement. I'll go ahead. Thank you.
No, you go ahead, Adrian. Go.
Okay. I was just gonna kind of just add something to both Nikki and Bernhard's point, which is because previously you would get very, very clinical data, like like how wide a vessel is, what the pace, what's the size of the blockage or the size of a hole or the whatever. You're looking at a physical surgical kind of measurement. Because we are now structured as providers and we see, as Nikki mentioned, he sees behavior data. That's what we see now as well, right? Previously, when you had a simple product, you simply see the clinical markers and the clinical data. But now we are seeing everything around it. So now we are seeing data about how long it takes to compile the information to submit a claim. We can optimize that. How long does it take to actually process it? Maybe we can optimize that. How long does it take from an onboarding process and training to issuing logins and compliance certs and all that? Like, we can all track that and optimize it. Previously, we were completely blind to it. So I totally agree with Bernhard. You need to think about this up front. But maybe a more practical suggestion, which really helped myself, is think about the potential data sources you're going to, or data sets that you're going to actually capture from all the various parts of your business, and then form hypotheses about what claims you might be able to make with that data, And it's just a hypothesis, right? It might be true, in which case X, it might be false, in which case Y. And then as you capture that data, and this is what we're doing, as you capture that data, you're forming and validating a dynamic hypothesis about what's actually happening. And I think that's really, really quite beautiful, right? I think on Bernhard's point about maybe there might not be useful data, but actually I think that's the chance of that is virtually zero.
Yeah.
It might not be the data you initially thought you might learn. It might not be the insight you thought, but you're definitely going to see something, and I'm pretty sure of that. So I think, figure out a hypothesis, figure out what claims that you might want to make from the data that you collect, and then optimize your product around that hypothesis is my recommendation.
I'll supplement that and also add one data point that everyone should be looking to get is compliance outside of the clinical trial environment, where you have objectivity around compliance in the real world setting. If you build your data strategy to also show compliance, for example, for our technology, the compliance rate for the in-clinic version of our predicate is less than 50% at the year mark. And that's because patients just don't want to come into a urologist office every week. And the urologists don't want to offer that to patients because it's too time consuming. What we can do now is we can actually look at the compliance data through our sensing data and do push notifications. Hey, you haven't done your stimulation this week. This compliance data doesn't only matter for the patients and their continued symptom control, it's also a function of ensuring long-term revenue and sustainability of that. We know exactly when a patient is non-compliant. We can question, hey, is everything going okay? Are the symptoms back? Are you having adverse effects? We can capture that much more earlier. Whereas in the real world environment, we already know how difficult it is to get patients to comply to taking daily medications. We can future-proof that by building the data strategies around how do we measure compliance, what are our strategies to service the patient so they get reminded that this is something that they need to do, and how do we ensure that for the providers that they also capture the revenue in the right format.
And if you have a digital ecosystem, and you have the mobile apps and the patients are using the mobile apps, et cetera, you have, multiple channels of getting that feedback to the patients and influencing your behavior, which is, again, done right, is a virtuous circle for sure.
There's a lot of, the existing method of capturing some of this, call it compliance or adherence or behavioral data, is very much to do with a doctor having a chat with a patient, describing symptoms or describing histories, and there's a lot of variability to that. Everyone describes their symptoms differently. Sometimes they don't tell the doctor everything. There are other sensitivities, right? So maybe moving towards a more objective and broader capture of some of this behavioral data is inevitably going to be very useful for us developers.
I would say one thing, just, abstracting, we're a technology company, and we see this across different things, right? There's this pattern, sort of the AI factory pattern, right? Where you're collecting data, then you have hypotheses and discovery of and testing of hypotheses, and then a determination. Hey, is this something that is potentially an AI algorithm that is part of a medical device, or it just fits in somewhere else? And then sort of bringing that, whether it's an AI algorithm or a simple tweak or whatever it is, back into the flow, right? And over time, if you are capturing more data and you have a really good hypothesis generation and testing area, how quickly can you get from data collection to injecting value back into the system? And then you measure that, and that's your factory, right? The core baseline of all of that is having a good data chain of custody, right? Where'd the data come from? Do you have access to it? Has it been altered in any way, shape, or form? If you don't have that for your data from the start, you may not be able to use that data, certainly for the medical device part of it, right? And so that's another thing, is sort of set that up at the beginning when you're doing this, is making sure you've got those audit trails, that metadata, and the permission structures, right? Primary and secondary uses of data. That's all part of what you should have in place, is certainly as soon as you start collecting real data.
Bernhard, it sounds like we're definitely moving beyond the, hey, I've got some old buckets of data out in the shed,
Yeah.
let's see what we can do with them. Got to be a little more thoughtful than that. So I do want to note, some people may have to drop off now. So let's do a quick summary, and then we actually have a few more questions. But for those who have to drop off, first of all, thank you guys. This is great. You've actually been very interactive with each other. I think you get very high marks on our webinar scale for kind of talking to each other, so next to each other. If you had to give advice for, let's close with a closing point. If you had to give advice for somebody who's a medical device manufacturer, is hearing this going, oh, this is really neat, this is really interesting, I think we could do something with this, what would you say are like the next steps they should do? Absolutely do this, or definitely do not do that?
One plug is I
Nick,
don't
you want
think
to go take this?
Yeah, one easy plug is that I think Orthogonal has really helped us really develop our strategy around our cloud infrastructure and the flow of data. That you guys have been really challenging us to think about it differently. So we really appreciate that. So just even having a discussion with your engineers was truly helpful. That's the first thing I would say, and I'm very happy with the service there. For us, it's really about, one is safety and efficacy first and foremost, building the strategies around that, whether it's data, whether it's hardware, whether it's software. But second, to not just see it as data. It's an enabling tool, particularly for reimbursement. If you can't capture the right data to support your reimbursement, then the business model may not work. So we always talk about the unmet clinical needs for the patients, the unmet clinical needs for the physician, but equally important is, what is the unmet needs to get reimbursement? And that's where I think we spent a lot of time within our companies to ensure that we want to get to patients, but in order to get to patients, we understand that we have to make an economic model that fits for the US healthcare system, for the Australian healthcare system, for the Japanese healthcare system. So spending a lot of intentional time in those areas is really critical, where the unmet clinical needs for patients and clinicians may be the same across geographies. The reimbursement unmet needs are very different.
it's always like what you're saying is, for as much time as you put into your clinical R&D, you got to put a lot of time into your business model R&D.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Maybe
Adrian.
more. Maybe more, actually.
Probably more.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, that's a great question, because that's actually the point that I was about to make, which is I don't have any really, honestly, it's so hard what we do, and not just we, but like Nick and all the new digital health innovators. It's so hard because there's no playbook. It's not that there were playbooks before, but everything changes now. What I would say is that it's been very helpful for me to just look at the trailblazers. You know, we're not the first company in AI and cardiovascular. We're not the last. Likewise in neurology, likewise in neuromodulation, etc. I think you know, where technology innovation can be quite broad, you know, sensors can get smaller, telemetry can get more powerful and faster. You know, you can do more and more. You can compute parallel manner. I think that's fine, and that's in fact a more open space. But the business model innovation, you can't just do what you want in some ways, right? Unfortunately, in healthcare, there are, you know, like it or not, there are current frameworks, and you can't kind of upset the setup too much. You know, you got to innovate a little bit, and then so there are different places where you can take more innovative risk. I think technology you can, business model maybe slightly less so. Compliance and security and that kind of stuff, you can take very little risk actually. But so
It's hard to be
what's
the Uber of healthcare, right? Yes.
exactly,
Yeah.
you can't break stuff, you can't move fast and break stuff. You break one thing, you're done. And so I think it's important to actually understand the lay of the land, right? We talked about iRhythm 2 or 3 times today. Look at iRhythm's business model. Look at their history. Look at, I mean, in some ways, look at CorVista. We are now testing patients. We are a front runner, a pioneer in our, you know, sort of remote rural diagnostic AI-based cardiovascular diagnostic space. You know, look at these companies that have figured out a way to bill in a novel manner, a way to operate in a novel manner, and see why that is, right? It takes a lot of analysis. And so I'm sure all the MedTech engineers are probably very unused to looking at a business model case study, but you need to do so. You know, sometimes I look at the HBS case studies, you know, it's like $8 a pop. You know, I think it's worth it. If you can't get free access from someone, look at S1s, right? From these listed companies, Cerebell, that listed earlier this year, Beta Bionics, right? HeartFlow. These are all pretty novel business models, and understanding how they work might inform you a little bit about how you should structure your business model as well.
Great stuff. So let me close with one last line of questions, in the goal not to overstay our victory, I think, of some terrific content here. We end on a high note. So it's interesting, you're talking about looking at these things differently. So from what I've seen in medical device, and I think this is a compliment, it's a very complicated industry, but we've gotten pretty good at segregating the roles and functions into, you know, I do reimbursement, you do, you know, support, you do surveillance. You guys are kind of mixing all that up. Is it the same people? Like, who do you get to do this stuff? Because it seems like people who know how to do this really well may not do well with this.
I'll take this, if you don't mind, Nick, I'll take a stab at this. I want to point our readers to a book that really inspired me. It's called Range by an author called David Epstein. This is not the biotech, is it Agios, David Epstein, or I forgot. But it's a sports writer, I believe. He was a Sports Illustrated writer, and he first looked at nature versus, or rather, early specialization versus late specialization. And he looked at Tiger Woods versus Roger Federer, where Tiger Woods specialized super early. He knew how to hold a putter almost before he could speak. Roger Federer was playing volleyball and a little bit of football, soccer, and then specialized relatively late. And then he expanded this investigation to academia, science, you know, industry, business. And what he noticed was the tagline of the book is that why generalists thrive in an increasingly specialized world. And it takes knowledge across disciplines now in order to do what we do. CorVista in particular, it's a really complicated device that uses data science, knowledge of kind of biophysics and how energy kind of flows inside the body. It's called phase-space tomography. So you need a lot of biostatistics and bioinformatics, but then also just pure biology and disease biology knowledge. And then we're building machine learning tools. So actually, our technology, I'd say, was really the brainchild of 4 very different individuals and their teams. It's a world-class physician, a world-class bioinformatician, a world-class engineer to build the device, integrate the software, and then a world-class biologist. And it really took all 4 of them to kind of develop this technology and the operations and the business model around it. For me, I have to speak to investors and machine learning engineers and then physicians, and I have to change my hats all the time. And so, I'm kind of a jack of all trades and the master of none, but actually that makes me thrive in my role right now. So, I think you really kind of need to know a little bit about everything. And really, I'm sure, a lot of people have heard that you need to have that final goal in mind and then do a future back to know what you need to do now. I think it's more important than ever, right? What Nick said earlier about knowing exactly what data you need to capture in order to secure reimbursement. You need to know that at day 1, right? So that when you're designing your hardware, signal acquirer, or whatever device and backend, that you're already structured in that way, capturing it, as Bernhard said, compliantly, so that it can be used in a compliant manner into clinical utility and healthcare outcome studies that can be evidence for reimbursement. It's all related, unfortunately. So there's a lot of research in non-scientific disciplines that I would say entrepreneurs and innovators need to do.
Thank you for
Agreed.
That's half
explaining
the
why
fun of
I,
it, though, right?
Yes.
as an American history major, can thrive in MedTech. I think, by the
You
way,
are the best set up, Randy.
Yeah, that's right.
they but actually, I think we're no longer a jack of all trades, master of none. We're now called deep generalists. So,
Yeah.
all right.
Generalists. I'm going to change that on my LinkedIn immediately.
Deep generalist, I like that. I'll quickly go. It's similar aspects to Adrian. We are still on our journey to getting to a positive company. We're still in clinical phase, so we are resource poor. But what I would say is, if anyone is really just starting up, I would hire your core team as soon as possible. Hire early, hire fast, hire often. Not just because you need to develop those internal capabilities, but also because you need to build a culture around your venture. Our culture at Australis Scientific is one where everyone that we hire, we look for sales acumen to begin with. Whether you're an engineer, whether you're a regulatory person, you are a salesperson first, because the opportunity at our stage of the company is to ensure that we continue to have the funds to continue the work in order to get to market. And that's when maybe more of the commercial people can take over. But if we build the core where everyone is a salesperson first, just like how every Marine is a shooter first, then I think you set yourself up for a sustainable business. You do need the compliance, you do need the engineering, but without the money to support the compliance and the engineering, you have nothing.
Very good.
Yeah. The business, what is it? The having business and science is not enough. You need to understand the business of science, and that is in itself a discipline.
Very good.
All right. Well, we want to thank you guys. This has been terrific. I also, as far as we found, I've never seen anybody else have a discussion or write anything on this subject as a subject on itself. So I think we've made a bit of history, and this will probably not be the last time this is discussed by us or others. So thank you for your pioneering work and really sharing your insights about how you've done it. It's been terrific. To our audience, This is a record. We're at 84% retention, 11 minutes past the hour. That's a new record.
Is that a record?
That's a very high watermark for us. So
I think it was the song that did it.
I think
be
they
honest,
all
but-
want to hear the whole.
all right.
That's what I'm.
If you asked for it, I wasn't going to do it, but it's no, I did actually include a custom lyric this time because I just felt like I had to talk about how bad the song is. So here we go.
We just lost 2 people.
Yeah.
Any questions from the audience that we should be entertaining, perhaps?
I didn't see any. Please reach out to us though and follow up, individually or together. We'd love to hear from you. LinkedIn's probably the best way to do it. There we go.
Yeah, likewise, please reach out to us. Adrian Lamb, either usually on LinkedIn is probably best. You can search for me anywhere. We're usually at the large scientific conferences. So the next one we'll be at is HFSA, and we've been also invited to AHA to present our new heart failure work. So if anyone's going to be there, please reach out and come say hi.
Very good.
Here we go.
Now the future's design. Care with value, solutions to share. Innovating the path in diagnostics and care.
Emerging models, breaking the mold. Profits meet purpose. Stories unfold. Therapeutics, tailored diagnostics, precise. Patients win big when providers think twice.
Medical minds pushing the line. Providers now the future's design. Care with value, solutions to share. Innovating the path in diagnostics and care.
Rethink the game, disrupt the
Can't take it
old play.
anymore.
Nick, Adrian, Bernhard, Randy lead the way. Orthogonal brilliance, weaving the thread. A model emerging where value is bred. I hope the
Care is better than this song. Medical minds pushing the line. Providers now the future's design. Care with value, solutions to share.
All right.
All right. I am pleased to report that you guys have more evidence that the care is definitely better than the song. So
Well, we'll
Thank
keep
you.
working on that.
Thank you very much, everyone.
thank you.
so much.
Thanks to our audience for attending.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Thanks, team. All right.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you guys.